Good morning, everybody. It is Sunday, November 25th, 2018. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and are going to have an enjoyable holiday season. I want to come on today because it's number one, it's been a long time since I did an EcoInvestment update because quite frankly, things unfolded as I expected them to from last January. I expected the stock market to have a difficult time surmounting the peaks that it hit in early 2018. And although we nominally exceeded that by August, September, the reality is that the market had lost a lot of its momentum, particularly the tech sector in there, and it had become, in my opinion, grossly overvalued. So we're now at a point where the realities of the current downturn, they don't make sense in the context of what people's expectations were. The economy is supposed to be robust and things, but underlying that has been a lot of Fed priming and a lot of pumping up of the economy in a way that temporarily pushed a lot of the debt aside and relieved the banks and other institutions of a lot of their bad debt. But the reality is that bad debt just doesn't disappear. It just gets folded into the federal books. And the federal books are a mess right now. The budget deficit is going to be over $1 trillion next year. It looks like the economy is running out of gas. The bottom is definitely fallen out of the housing market. And as I've said before on various hangouts that I've been on, particularly TR Preppers Tuesday night hangouts, we have had low interest rates for so long, for so many years, that we, in my opinion, have become like hothouse orchids. It used to be when interest rates fluctuated, when they ran up from 6% to 18% in 1980, 81, when Paul Volcker, the Federal Reserve Chairman, was determined to snuff out inflation once and for all, pushed those rates up super high. It broke the back of the economy to introduce the terrible recession of 1981. 1982. The realities of that, though, were that look at that change in rates from 6, 7, 8% up to 18%. Mortgages, yeah, the economy died, but we weren't as sensitive back then. Commerce was still being done. But now look at the tight range we're in, where we go from, say, 3%, 2.9%, 2.8%. 10-year note yield, the 10-year federal U.S. note yield, we go from 2.8 to 3.3. And it's almost like we broke the back of the housing market. Why? Because we're so sensitive to this particular rate level now that even the slightest change of a 0.5 percentage point seemed to wreak great havoc on people's buying decisions. It's very strange, but it just shows you we've gone from being robust roses that can survive and flourish again in spring and summer to hothouse orchids where if conditions aren't perfectly maintained, then the potential to wither and die is there. And this is the reality I think that we face today is our economy is not set up to sustain any kind of rate increase at all because all kinds of bad things happen. From budgets and debt service starts to increase, and well, all sorts of bad things happening. So it's a recognition that number one, things were overpriced, as they have been for well over a year and a half, and number two, that we're more sensitive to changes in interest rates and not in a positive way. But I really want to key down on Bitcoin today because Bitcoin's been one of those things that I've loved to hate. And I've particularly watched it ever since it peaked out at just below $20,000 last December. And now we've broken below $4,000 here. And it always amazed me that people bought the Bitcoin story. I mean, intelligent people. When all it turned out to be was a whirlwind that gains people that believers in it, they put their money into it, they talk to more people, they put their money into it. It rises up in value, which draws more money in. This is a really perverse thing about a capitalist economy and investment markets is the higher something goes, the more demand increases. It's quite the opposite for other products. If the cost of gasoline goes up, we tend to demand less of it as it rises. Can you imagine how much gasoline you're going to be buying at $10 a gallon as opposed to $2.50? A lot less. You start to make dramatic changes. But in investment markets, the higher a share of Apple or Google goes, the more fascinated people become. The Bitcoin, the higher it goes, the more people want in on it because it looks like a one-way street to riches. Of course, like any investment anywhere, it runs out of steam because you need an ever-growing stream of suckers to come in and support that. More and more people to support that story. Well, Bitcoin reaches a point where you can't convince other people to join it, either A, because they're not intelligent enough to grasp the great concept of Bitcoin, or B, they don't have the money to put into it, or C, they just have no interest in it, period. They don't do investing. So what happens? Your investment starts to crest over the hill, and before you know it, we're on the slope on the downside. And Katie bar the door. But what is Bitcoin? It's a manufactured currency that depends on commerce and government to allow its existence. In other words, some governments have just outlawed Bitcoin. They're not allowed to be used, and that's a stake in the heart right there. Most states you can't use it, although Ohio is an exception. They're going to be starting to allow Bitcoin to be used for payment of taxes and things. The problem with that is, what government wants to be at the to play a roller coaster or roulette wheel? How are you ever going to plan your budgets when you have a alternate currency that just fluctuates like crazy? Yeah, maybe it goes up again. Maybe it goes to zero, which wouldn't surprise me. And then what do you do with all that Bitcoin tax revenue that you got in? So you got to be very careful. Anytime something becomes large enough that it pulls the limelight away from sovereign currencies, the nations are just going to crush that down. You might say, oh, they can't do that. Bitcoin's international. Oh, yeah, they can do that very easily. They can choke the money flows through things like credit cards, and it's very easy to do that because at the end of the day, when you have a Bitcoin, you have to convert that to some type of sovereign currency, and therein lies the choke point where the sovereign governments can get in there and just crush the life out of it. And we're seeing that now. It falls of its own weight. And now people run around and they wonder, what's a Bitcoin worth? Is it worth $10,000? Is it worth $10? Who knows? So you have all these international players that are buying and selling and trying to figure out if they're buying something valuable or they're buying a piece of junk. And right now the pressure continues to build on the downside because people have no idea of the intrinsic worth of a Bitcoin. They do have an idea of the intrinsic worth of a US dollar because it's established against other foreign nations' currencies and established against the price of gold. So therein, it's no threat to sovereign governments. They don't, okay, our dollar gets debased, it buys less and less. But the reality of it is that there'll always be something there as long as the government is there. Yeah, it may be debased, but when you're in a world of Bitcoin, you're just floating in free fall. You have no idea where you're going to land. And there are people that I think in excess of $700 billion have been wiped out of Bitcoin since the peak. So just be careful what you put your money into. My best advice is have something real at the end of it. Whether it's a share of a company, whether it's a piece of silver, whether it's a piece of gold, whether it's a piece of estate jewelry or a weaponry, a Glock or an AK-47, something of tangible value. that at least when it's all said and done, you have something that holds its value instead of having floating to no value. Well, time to climb off the soapbox, and hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll have a nice holiday season coming up. Yeah, I'll be updating more frequently because now the situation is in motion, is in big motion around the world. A lot of things have gone on. Oil, other things, the long expected recollapse of oil took place that I just knew was coming. I thought it would be coming in spring and summer. It came in late fall here. So lots of stuff to talk about in the future. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Your thumbs up are appreciated.